Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. Joining me now is Judge and Trial Attorney Ashley Willcott, and we've been listening to Wallace Bradsher, who is actually former prosecutor, former district attorney, who was a defendant in this case. And the allegation is that he and his co-defendant, Craig Blitzer, did a wife swap. They collected these salaries and did no work. Ashley, I want to ask you as a judge and especially as an attorney, I know the co-defendant in this case, Craig Blitzer, has already pled guilty. And one of the things, and rightfully so, many of the cases that he presided over were now being questioned. Do you think we'll see this here in the Bradsher case? Because, again, if I'm a defendant, if I've gone to jail or have been convicted of something that they presided over, I would probably question, hey, was there something going on that led to my conviction? What do you think?
Absolutely. And the main point is defendants are going to want to look at it and say, did they do something that was not allowable under the law, that allowed evidence that should not have come in my case? And there's absolutely grounds for appeal, quite frankly, on some of those cases if that happens. So I think if I were a defendant, I would absolutely look into that.
Right. And, you know, again, Wallace is defending himself in this case. Now, we've heard of, you know, the average person defending themselves in a case, but how common is it for an actual attorney to be his own defense? Is that something that goes on in the courtroom?
Listen, it does. But you know that adage, you know, only a fool is his own attorney when he is an attorney. And it really is something that can be very dangerous because that knowledge might hurt you when you're trying to use it to protect yourself or defend yourself. You know, I would always advise if I'm on the bench and there's someone before me, especially an attorney charged with something, and they don't want to have an attorney, I always advise them if they're right and advise them that it's probably best they do have an attorney. So certainly, this is his own choice. You don't see it very often, but I'm a little surprised he doesn't have his own attorney.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I was in his shoes, especially for what he faces, I mean, this carries up to 18 years in prison. I think I would want to have my own attorney. We've been listening to him actually cross-examine the investigator in this case, investigative David Whitley. And now he's actually questioning his notes. Did he follow policy? Did he turn his notes in time? Is he just trying to plant that seed of reasonable doubt that this investigator did his job? Or what's his play here?
His play is, and he got a little bit out of the testimony, but basically he's testifying through this witness to say, didn't you write these notes in a way that it's convoluted? Isn't it true that what I told you was that the transfer of the wives to work at each department was approved by AOC and consequently there was nothing wrong with it? Right. My opinion is that's what he's trying to get out of this witness and discredit him and say, but your notes were not good.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that could be, but I mean, as a taxpayer, just on those allegations, if I'm a taxpayer and I paid you $48,000, which is a salary that a lot of people in this country wish they had, I mean, I'd be very, very upset. Wouldn't you, Ashley?
Absolutely. And that's what's hard about these cases. Is somebody physically hurt? Was somebody assaulted? Was there a murder? No, but it doesn't make it any less heinous, especially when you look at someone like this. Talk about corrupt politics, right? Somebody who has a position of power, who was trusted by the people to prosecute crimes, who's actually committing a heinous crime himself. $48,000 is nothing to sneeze at.
Right. Let's forget about Russia collusion. I think the collusion happened right there in the state of North Carolina. We're going to get you right back into the courtroom in the Wallace Bradsher case. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. It looks like they're taking an afternoon break in this case. And right now we want to go over the top crime stories of the day here at Law and Crime Network. Take a look. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. And all I can say is, wow, 18 years to serve in prison for kidnapping that little baby. And me being a parent, you know, again, I can't imagine. Still with me is my guest, Judge Ashley Willcott. And Ashley, I know you're a parent as well. Can you imagine what the biological family went through for 18 plus years trying to figure out what happened to their baby? But my question is, do you think justice was really served here. I mean, on the one hand, you have this person that kidnapped this little baby, who raised this baby to be her own, and then you have the biological family who for 18 plus years never knew what happened to her. So is there really justice in this case?
I think this is the best justice that can be had. The plea deal, the maximum possible sentence was 22 years. She did get 18 years. It is very important not only to punish her, but also as a deterrent to people who want to kidnap babies, that she receive a sentence like this. Now, the problem is there's no one wins. You have biological parents devastated and robbed of an entire life of their child, not knowing what happened to their child. You have a child who's going to be emotionally traumatized for the rest of her life because the person she thought was her mother, in fact, isn't her mother and kidnapped her. And then you have this person who kidnapped a baby and hid it for this many years. There's just no good.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, I couldn't imagine going through that. Like, I can't imagine when my kids are gone for the summer, let alone 18 plus years. We want to switch gears, get back to the Wallace Bradsher case. We want to take a listen to Cindy Blitzer, who is the wife of the co-defendant in this case, during her cross-examination. Let's see what she had to say inside the courtroom. Hey, welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. We were just hearing cross-examination from Cindy Blitzer. She is the wife of the co-defendant in this case. Again, this case is in North Carolina, where two elected officials, two prosecutors, hired their wives to work at each other's offices and collect a pretty modest salary, where the allegation is no work was done. Still with me is Judge and trial attorney Ashley Willcott. Ashley, we just heard from the wife of the co-defendant. My question to you is, she is involved in this scheme, so how strong is her credibility in this case? She is a woman who had it all, $48,000. She's going to school. She's getting people to do her homework, which I wish I had someone for my son to do his homework. So how big is her credibility in this case for the prosecution?
Well, that's going to be something that they have to take into account in presenting her testimony. Number one, she looked exceedingly nervous. Number two, to me, her testimony was just trying to say, well, I didn't really know who I was reporting to. Nothing was my fault. Nobody was giving me clear direction. And so I don't know how that's going to play out in terms of her ultimate credibility.
Yeah, I don't think ignorance can actually be a defense here, right? I mean, everyone has a job. Everyone knows who they report to. They know who pays them. They know who signs their boss, who does their checks, who does their evaluation. So I don't think ignorance can actually play a defense here. We want to get back into the courtroom and hear more testimony from Cindy Blitzer on direct examination. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. Still with me, Judge and trial attorney Ashley Willcott. Actually, we just heard testimony from, again, the wife of the co-defendant in this case. And as you heard Mr. Bradsher talking about some courses she was taking, it looks like she was taking nursing classes. But I guess my question is, if the co-defendant in this case took a deal, he took a plea, why do you think Mr. Bradsher is just sticking to his guns and not taking this plea deal? Why is he going to trial with this?
Well, I think he does not think he did anything wrong. And I would submit that the fact that he's representing himself, he must feel fairly confident that he did things above board and not wrong. So let's talk a little bit about her testimony. One of the things I noted was she said, I really didn't know who I was supposed to report to. And I think that in and of itself could be attributed to poor management. So maybe Mr. Bradsher is going to try to say, listen, we could have managed her better, but it doesn't amount to a crime. I disagree. I think all the facts together are going to prove it amounted to a crime, but I'm just hypothesizing as to what might be in his mind.
Yeah, and to your point, she said at first during her testimony, she said, I hardly ever talked to you, Mr. Bradsher. Then she came back later within a few minutes and said, I would call you because you were the ultimate supervisor. So I don't know if she's just playing this role and she really didn't know who she reported to, or she's just trying to, make herself look less culpable in this thing. I really don't know what's going on. I understand they are back live in the courtroom in North Carolina. We have a new witness. I'm sorry, we still have the same witness on the stand, the investigator. Let's get live back in the courtroom. Hey, welcome back to the Law and Crime Network, and those were the top crime stories of the day. We've been covering the Wallace Bradsher case in North Carolina. This is a prosecutor, a former prosecutor, who is accused of hiring his co-defendant's wife. They swapped wives to get this salary that neither one actually did work for. Still with me is judge and trial attorney Ashley Willcott. And Ashley, we got about 3 minutes, but I wanted to ask, this is a very convoluted case to say the least, but is it me or are some of Bradsher's questions kind of hard to follow? Like, where's he going with this?
I feel like it is, and a little confusing, because when you ask questions as a lawyer, you want to paint a picture, even on cross-examination. Right. So I wish he would use what we call head notes in the business, so that each time he switches topics, he could say, for instance, now I want to turn your attention to your statement about, and I wrote a few things down, for instance, about the work that Blitzer did, or now I'd like to talk to you about the way that we kept time for that, or now I'd like to talk to you about your documentation around my statement, so that each time he changes topics or he's trying to prove something on cross-examine, it would be easier potentially to follow why he's pulling it out, what he's pulling out, and what point he's trying to make on cross.
Right. We touched on this earlier. Like, is it really a good idea for him to be his own attorney? And I think if he had counsel, maybe the questions would come across a little more easy to understand, or at least his counsel could advise, this is how you should phrase those questions. Do you think, in the time that we have left, about 2 minutes, do you think that being his own attorney will come back to bite him when this verdict comes in?
I could just say, as a judge and the people that I've seen represent themselves as attorneys, regrettably, even if you're an excellent attorney, I think representing yourself is necessarily too emotional, too close to home, and you cannot see the forest for the trees, so to speak. So I don't ever think it's a good idea for an attorney to represent themselves in any matter, civil or criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, and I guess we'll have to wait and see as this goes on. This trial in North Carolina resumes this Monday. Wallace Bradsher is on trial right now in the state of North Carolina. Ashley, I want to thank you for joining and sticking with me today. I want to thank our viewers at the Law and Crime Network. As always, we appreciate you tuning in every day, getting the biggest trials in the world only right here at the Law and Crime Network, and we will see you on Monday. Thank you and good night.